I think we can start this session. Today we have Jim, and Jim is going to talk about in-know-vation. I can't even spell the way he wrote the title of this session. So over to you, Jim. First of all, who is Jim? Okay, and then let's talk about your topic. Thank you all for being here today.
Who is Jim? An existential question. Good evening. I guess everybody's evening. We might have some people eventually a bit further away, but probably not at the moment. So who is Jim? Jim is a designer by profession, industrial designer. So physical things, mass produced, landfill, as we've just been discussing with a couple before we started. That's obviously not entirely fair because we all need products. In fact, I'm about to use a pen. And we're using computers, and I've got a whiteboard, and it's a very I guess who is Jim? Jim is an old fella, so analog. I think there's value in analog over a digital platform. Who is Jim? Jim, for 15 years, designed consumer products fairly conventionally, and then took a very unconventional career path and ended up using design in science and R&D, principally in healthcare, but not exclusively. So that was 17 years ago. I'll keep repeating it because people are joining. Who is Jim? Jim is somebody who had an epiphany 6 years ago when he was asked to write a strategy by the chief exec of the 6th fastest growing tech company in the world, a software services firm in the US, who had bought a UK-US principally digital service design firm, and asked the question, how do I use this design asset that I bought to transform healthcare to create software services revenue? And I had a bit of an epiphany. You can't transform healthcare with design. Why not? Well, in my opinion, and I guess in the room already, there'll be a few different opinions on this, but in my opinion, design is the expertise of that which is desirable and usable. It is the expertise to know what is desirable and usable, and then the ability to craft it. And healthcare doesn't measure whether something's desirable and usable, just measures whether it's feasible and viable. Does it work? Can I afford it? Does it kill them? Does it save money? And then you have this strange phenomenon where you get desirability and usability for free just by building something. So a little scenario, you and I go into business together and we decide to make some money charging people to go up a tower and look at the view. You're the business person, I'm the engineer. You're in charge of viability, making money. I'm in charge of feasibility, making the tower. You tell me I've got a tight budget. I say that's fine, I'm very clever. So I build a tower. We stand back and look at the tower and we're rather pleased. We ask the person next to us, what do you think of our tower? And she says, I love it. And we ask the other person on the other side of us, what do you think of our tower? I hate it. Now, we didn't add design. It was just the business person and the engineer. But we've achieved a desirability response. And then we remember that we need to make some money. So we say, well, you can't see from here, but if you go up the tower, you can see a great view. £5, €5 to go up the tower. And so they pay and they get to the tower and they look confused because there's no staircase and no lift. Because you told me we didn't have much money. I'm a clever engineer, so I put the steel structure close enough to act as a ladder on the outside of the tower. So people start climbing up the outside of the tower. Don't like it, it's really unusable. Come back, ask for their money back. So we've created something just by feasibility and viability that some people like, some people don't, but most people can't use. And the complexity of usability is linked to desirability because they can't use it, they don't like it. And so it's a very subtle, sophisticated thing. So anyway, so this was the epiphany. This is a huge digression because this is not what I'm supposed to be talking about. but you'll gather that I do this all the time. And then shortly, well, I say shortly, the idea, of course, is to draw something on here that's of interest. But at any point, I tend not to look at the chat. If Hugo sees or somebody sees something really, an interesting question, an interesting, just shout out. Otherwise, if you want to shout out, which I want you to do, just kind of wave and I'll spot you until we get more.
Jim, this is just like a cafe. People just shout. That's it.
That's exactly what I want. And so just shout. But there's not much to shout about at the moment, so let me press on. So the epiphany was that you can't transform healthcare with design because nobody's measuring it, and therefore nobody's investing in it, and therefore you can't make money as a designer. But if no one's paying for it, suddenly I had the realization that you can solve a problem in 20 seconds. If somebody's paying you to solve a problem, you can't do it in 20 seconds. But if no one's paying you, you can solve it in 20 seconds, because we do that all the time. So there was a freedom in the reality that no one was paying. And from that came this. Now, this is a broad description of, and why the title In-know-vation? Well, in part, because I'm going to start by telling you something you already know. And in part, because most people with the responsibility of innovation in organizations are really the people that come back to me very fast when I get down to this point, and they say, no, thanks, we know how to do innovation. So let me tell you something you already know. The innovation funnel. Science, ideas, R&D, innovation funnel based on need, driven by money, put things in, solution pops out the end. Just a little point, actually. If you're not watching me on the speaker view and you're still on gallery view, this will look very small. So flip to speaker view on your laptops. I'm sure you worked that out by now. There are various drivers as to determine what goes in the funnel. Typically, the novelty of the idea, the intellectual property, the quality of the team. So there's the IP, there's the team, and then the project plan, the Gantt chart. And people line up because you said, I've got some money, I've got a problem, I want people to come in with some ideas. And this happens externally, whether it's a sort of a government-driven agenda, or internally, whether it's a single sort of innovation budget within an organization. And we decide which ones to put in based on the same parameters. Now, the first observation is that it's not a funnel. If it was a funnel, everything you put in would come out the other end. That's what funnels are for. That's what they do. If you've got a motorbike, you've got a lawnmower, if you're making jam, you want the contents to go into the thing, you use a funnel. You don't want mess all over the kitchen counter or the lawn. But we don't expect everything to come out the end. We expect maybe one thing to come out the end to solve the problem. And so actually, it's not a funnel, it's a filter, but we don't call it the innovation filter. Some people might, I've not seen it. And you could argue, well, what's the problem with that? And my response to that is language is incredibly powerful. So by calling it a funnel, we behave in a certain way. And typically that behavior, not exclusively, but typically is that you keep things in. Now, a sort of a classic, as I said, my background is design. A classic design project is you have sort of stage gates and you start eliminating things as you get to here. But if you're driving innovation programs, projects, things tend to basically stay in, not least if you're funding them nationally or from something like that. And the problem with everything staying in is that it gets blocked up. And so our great intentions get a little bit scuppered because this is too much going through the funnel. Just a point of definition again is that for me, getting there, which is getting to market, is not innovation. Getting there is innovation. So what's the difference between there making money, or changing behavior, or whatever the measures of success are. So that for me is innovation. The UK government doesn't manage to define innovation anymore. It used to, though, and I go with the old definition. Many years ago, the UK government used to define innovation as the successful commercialization of a novel idea. So successful commercialization of a novel idea. I buy that, I go with that. But the problem is very little is getting there, let alone there, because it's getting blocked up there. People that fund or manage innovation get a bit embarrassed by that because nothing's really becoming visible in the real world. So what we do is we move the end of the funnel, correctly called filter, back to here. Because then we can let people out of the filter in a big hole here. And if you've successfully done your project or done your work against grant application or whatever it is, you're now really good at doing something. So you're allowed out having been successful, even though you haven't actually achieved anything. The word innovation is a noun. It's something you achieve. It's not something you do. The word innovate is the verb, but we've turned innovation from a noun to a verb. We've started doing innovation. And you're allowed out, and what happens is you go back to the beginning and you do another project or you do another activity. I'm just going to flick my screen because I'm just going to see if I can get myself. No, I can't. So A. Pekowski is, I think, recording, which means I can't see myself on the main screen, but it's not a problem because I can see this. So what you end up with under the banner of innovation, in my experience, and this is a general sort of statement, a general argument based on experience, is that you get a cycle of activity back here that people call doing innovation, which technically you can't do, you can only achieve. And so when I had this epiphany, when I was asked to write the strategy, and I discovered that no one was going to pay to transform healthcare if you're a design capability, you could put that into the innovation realm too. I suddenly had the freedom to turn the world upside down. There's still stuff here, there's still science, there's still R&D. We're still focused on success beyond the market. This gap, by the way, between the two real world exit points is what people call the valley of death. And the valley of death, as you may know, is a valley not of discovery. That's the bit of discovery. The valley of death is a valley of commercialization. So this is the solution that needs commercializing in order to make sales revenue and be successful. So we still have this valley because it's man-made, unfortunately. And it's a creation of the funnel to some extent because of where we put the emphasis in terms of activity and funding and things like that. The advantage with this world is that if your job is to manage innovation budget and to look busy and to, in theory, de-risk, this is brilliant because it's very expensive because you're spending lots of things. There's a lot of activity, so you're busy. And to some extent, you've de-risked because you put a lot of options through the funnel. The problem with this one, you've still got a definition of need, X. The question here is, which one do you put in? And that's a really, really challenging thing to get right. If this is a precision sort of approach to innovation. So to resolve that dilemma, I don't start here. I start here. What is that? Well, that's the solution. So hang on a minute, I hear you say. In fact, I don't hear you say anything, so you're being very polite at the moment, but I will sort of shut up in a minute and we can have more of a discussion. You say, hang on a minute, these are all very smart people, and they're saying that it's going to take that period of time, cost this amount of money to get to this solution. And where design and things like that have taken it, it becomes a little bit even more tortuous path. So how can you claim to start with the solution? Well, because I'm one of them, and I got one of them. And that's how the human brain works. We have imagination, we have creativity, we have knowledge, we have intuition. The neural activity in our brain joins things up very, very fast. And we can imagine the future. You can imagine yourself tomorrow evening, Friday evening, putting your feet up, having a glass of wine or a beer, whatever you do. You've just gone there, actually. It's almost impossible, I find, not to go in my imagination where somebody offers me to go. And for each of us, there'll be actually quite a complex, if you were going to do a computer visualization of what you've just had in your imagination, it would actually be pretty complex. But it took you a split second because you have a lot of knowledge and you have the ability to join knowledge in different ways. And this is where the whole Bayesian theorem comes in. Because Bayesian theorem, in fact, if I can find it, which I probably can, and I'll need to get another pair of glasses. Bayesian theorem basically is a complicated, some of you may know it, I didn't, it's a very complicated formula. And, but there's an equal sign. And you have a complicated formula and then an equal sign. And I was reading an article in the FT a few weeks ago by Tim Harford, the economist. And he's talking about Thomas Bayes and Bayesian rule or theorem that was conceived in the 1740s, and even Thomas Bayes abandoned it himself, and then it was rediscovered in the 1770s by Pierre-Simon Laplace. And he puts it quite interesting. He says there's nothing objectionable about the mathematics behind it, the theorem, but what caused controversy is the idea that you can start with an arbitrary guess, then update it over time as new information comes in. And for me, if you look at the mathematical formula of Bayesian theorem, the guess is actually the answer. It's not the guess here, it's the guess here. Based on prior knowledge, that's one of the fundamentals of the theorem. But the controversial bit is that you have an equals value which you're willing to update. And so the focus becomes the answer, not the idea, the solution, not the idea. In the world, there are various people with pretty much unexplained knowledge and crazy imagination. There aren't many of those at all. You know, the Leonardo da Vinci's and the Michelangelos and the Teslas and people like that. So there aren't many of those. So this model is not really very good, then you argue, because there aren't many people that can just get the solution right all the time. But it turns out there's between 1 or 2% of the population who have a certain type of brain that means that they basically live in a different reality. A reality of answers, a reality of new solutions to problems, which is getting very close to innovation. One of the realities of these people is they don't really have the unexplained knowledge thing. And so what I, by chance, discovered I was doing over the last 15 or more years is I was gathering knowledge from a whole range of people that span fundamental science through to chief execs of multinational companies. And in the spirit of this innovation cafe, basically my day job is drinking coffee with people. Slightly scuppered by COVID, but we'll get back to it. But in the meantime, Zoom will suffice. And in the English language, you're allowed to invent collective nouns. So I can invent a name that describes this group of people, and the people were actually experts, and we don't really like experts. So I created a collective noun that made them feel a little bit more comfortable. I call them a meadow of experts, because in the allegory, this human behaves a bit like a honeybee gathering nectar from a wildflower meadow. It's just a sort of daily routine of tiny, tiny parts that combined are of great value. And it turns out there's between 1% and 2% of the population who are at a sort of an elite level of this. It's really interesting. If I said to you, if I asked you, can you run? Yeah, of course I can run. Not everyone can run, but pretty much the whole population can run. Oh, have you heard of, do you have a running club in your town? Well, I don't know really. Do you have a national team? Yeah, of course. Do you have an Olympics team? Yeah. Have you heard of Usain Bolt? Yeah, I love Usain Bolt. But he's much faster at running than you. Yeah, that's fine. You know, he's a great athlete. His physique, his DNA, his genetics, all the training. But I love it. He's brilliant. He is so much better at running than me. We all have the ability to intuitively solve problems in a split second. But when I tell you there are some people who are Olympians at it, and there are some who are Usain Bolts, we don't like that. It's very strange. We've become so obsessed with a sort of an inclusive, comfortable way of solving problems where we consult with as many people as possible. And the idea that one person can, in a split second, know what the answer is, we don't like that. Which is one of the reasons why we dismiss this. Now, I'm going to sort of skip a lot just for the benefit of bringing you guys into the conversation. But what we're finding is that it's possible to have no solutions. It's possible to have one solution. It's possible to have multiple solutions. What's interesting is that if you go to the analysts and you say, can you tell me the value of that solution? The analyst says, sure. It's a triangle. I can recognize a triangle. I know what your problem is. I'll tell you what the value is. That's a circle. That's a square. If you go, and you can do that principally at the beginning of the process. If you go to the analyst at the beginning of this process and say, can you measure, oh, we haven't got a solution yet. I'll tell you what, come back and tell us what the value of the solution is once we spent all the money to try to get to a solution. It was really interesting. I said to the analyst when I first did this, I said, are you not concerned that I can't tell you how I got to my solution? The analyst said, I couldn't care less how you got to the solution. You've asked me to tell you what the value of the solution is, not how you got there. And in the realm of innovation, we've become, and design as well, very similar, we've become obsessed with the journey. We've turned innovation into a verb. And so we actually measure worth and value in this activity, not in what it's going to achieve in the market. It could be that all are worth doing. And so we have an application of the value of the science. But let's imagine this one is marginal, this one is rubbish, but this one is brilliant. That's the one we need to go to market. And if you're interested, I'm going to stop just in a second. If you're interested, I'll tell you how I do that. But at this point, when I sort of drew that, a cardio-electrophysiologist at Imperial College London said, well, you've created an impeller. Because you've created something here, which you are priming with a solution. You're moving the solution to the market, which is creating a vacuum, which means you can then pull through your technology and science. In fact, you can combine them. And there is no resistance in a vacuum. Things move in straight lines. And by going to market first, before you pull this through, and I can answer how you do that if you're interested, you actually have a gap here for this. And so it pulls straight through. And there's a great example of this, which is COVID vaccination. So the COVID vaccines, there was a lot of funding here. All of a sudden, there was a need. And what happened is, yeah, the government's put a bit more funding in here, but most fundamentally, and this is the controversial thing around Europe at the moment, is the government's bought the products. And in Europe, UK were quick out the gun, which is unusual for us. And we did an exclusive deal to buy product. So we're basically the consumers of a product that didn't exist. And it's that revenue here and market weighting that speeds up that whole paradigm. So I'm going to stop at that point, but I can fill in any of the gaps if people are interested. So over to you guys to sort of ask some questions, I guess, and then we'll see where we get to. While you're pondering, the know, K-N-O-W, in innovation. No, it's all right, Jim, we know how to do innovation. The irony is, they're about the only people that are saying this. Design a little bit as well. And I say to people, possibly like yourselves, I said, what are you trying to do? You know, you're in charge of innovation in your company. What are you trying to do? Well, we're trying to get other people to do things differently or to create new products. Oh, I see. So why are you so resistant to me asking you to do something differently? Because we know how to do innovation. But the controversy or the hypocrisy of my argument is that this person knows what the answer is. And you could say, well, you can't have it both ways, Jim. But it seems to be what's happening. So, as I say, over to you. Dumbfounded.
Everybody's a bit shy.
I've got a question.
One.
No, I'm not shy.
Deborah.
How do you find the people with the brains? So, and do you think the people with the brains know that they are those types of people? You're perhaps an exception.
So, the majority of people don't know that they're these sort of people because when they were in the school playground, they got picked on. And being picked on is not very nice. And another reality of the human species is we're a social species. And when you're picked on, you're isolated. And so there you are in the playground. You've just been effortlessly creative as you've consciously started manipulating the physical world as you've grown up. You're given a blank sheet of paper and a crayon and you just fill it. You put a saucepan on your head and you're a spaceman or woman. You're not pretending to be a spaceman or woman. You are. Your imagination is that good. And then you go to school, and of course there are famous talks about the problem with education driving out creativity. But you're standing in the playground and you're seeing something completely different to everybody else. You say, well, this is different. And you get picked on. So what do? You suppress. Well, you could exaggerate your differentness and be a eccentric. It's very difficult to be an eccentric in the world unless you're incredibly wealthy. Ideally, you hold your ground and you say, no, I just see the world differently. And all your friends go, oh, fantastic. We like people who see the world differently. Come and play with us. But that doesn't happen. So what happens is you suppress your ability to see the world differently. You pretend you can't see the world the way you see the world. But the problem at that age is your brain is incredibly plastic. And so actually, you start losing the ability to see the world differently. Because the way the neural connectivity in your brain works, don't use it, lose it sort of thing. And therefore, a lot of people don't know. And then, of course, they've got to be included through school, and then they've got to pass exams. And passing exams is the opposite of this. Passing exams is very orderly, go through this, told something, do it, have a deliverable, have a stage gate, have another exam, pass that. Doesn't really matter what you say as long as you do what people are expecting you to say. If you go into an exam and you're doing physics, maths, and art, or you go to 3 exams, you go to the maths exam and there's a question, you sit there and you don't do anything, you failed. You go into the physics exam, there's a question, you don't do anything, you fail. You go into the art exam and you mash together the question of physics and maths and you create this explosion of creativity, you fail. And so, how do you find them was the other part of your question. You tell stories like this.
But the thing is, are we talking about innovation or creativity? Everybody can be creative. I believe in that, right? I can have thousands of creative, different ideas, but isn't that different of innovation? Okay, Kevin, yeah. Halfway between thousands of ideas and 5 per day. So yeah, creativity is one thing. What you are saying is, if we find a creative person in the organization, that person will drive innovation.
No.
No.
Innovation is the successful commercialization of a novel idea. So innovation for me is the act of commercialization. Commercialization increasingly is incredibly complex. And so you need a whole system of abilities to deliver some solutions to market. And the irony is that almost these days, the more simple the solution, the more complex the system. And because of the nature of how we've integrated digital into the realm of the physical. You know, you look at companies like Airbnb, and it's an incredibly complex system that gives you a really simple user experience. And so the problem is, and this is trying to answer your question, or not so much the problem, there is an element in the definition of innovation, which is, if you like, the novel idea. But this world emphasizes the value of novelty on intellectual property, particularly in the realm I've been in recent years in science and technology, slightly different in consumer product, because there are 5 components of intellectual property. One is know-how, so you can't defend that legally, you just keep quiet. Then there's patent, design right, trademark, copyright. What something looks like, what it's called, how you describe it, you don't get to the end. So the only thing you have at the beginning, if you're taking an idea-based model, is a patent, and that really drives a very sort of defined solution. And but this person doesn't operate that way. This person sees sees all of the complexity in one go and can describe it in a nutshell. That's what this person does. So this person is simply the person that can describe the solution that everybody else has to labor really hard at to deliver.
Yeah, and what I think everybody's thinking is, okay, how can we find that guy? Where's the Elon Musk inside of my
So can I make an observation? Can I make an observation here? And thank you for the lecture, Jim. I think what you're describing is a situation that is very unlikely to happen at scale. And there are some limitations to that approach. And I do agree that approach might work. But one of the limitations is that person needs to be a super SME of a specific market to have that approach, for example, where he understands what the design element will be across the sort of different steps of the value stream, if you like, and he already anticipates that that solution will help to tackle the different steps of the process of value stream. And he can tell her the sort of 3 levels of that value stream, which is the touch point with the end user, the engineering lens, and the design lens. So, and therefore that person has the capacity to undertake that approach. The reason why I disagree with you is that innovation as it is, if you like, for a conceptualization of a new product development, and I think you are spot on, innovation only happens if you can make money. So I think you are completely spot on, otherwise you're just ideating. Is that you don't have a funnel, but rather a diamond, where you're able to first enter into a diverge type of thinking, in which you try to understand, any idea is a good idea for a specific, problem statement, and then you converge. And in the converge element, you need to look at different elements. The first element, to your point, is, do we think that it will have, good traction from the market? Is it something that we can do? And finally, can we make money? So when you ideate in those type of situations, if you like, if you are talking about innovation as a sort of idea to a problem, obviously you need to understand that you need to have some filters, if you like. You need to screen some of the ideas. That can look into different variables. For instance, the addressable market. If you're talking about the B2B type of environment, is it replicable? if you are looking at the B2C, you know, what is our customer segmentation, and you start to test your idea to see if the customer segmentation that you, for example, conceptualize initially, effect the matter will have that the level of desirability towards a problem. So that's why I don't think, you know, I think that approach, the bottom down can work, but there's a lot of limitations to that. The testament to this is, you mentioned Airbnb. Airbnb was this close to fail. The reason why it didn't fail was because it had that diamond thinking. For example, they were trying, they did a, the last step was a growth hacking to understand how they could make money because they were going bankrupt. And it was a product manager that really understood the technicality of, for example, access, because they didn't have budget. So how can we, scale without budget? And he knew how what Craigslist limitations were, and how to promote Airbnb in Craigslist without spending money. And that's how things sort of spun out. So that's my observation. It's very, very unlikely that you are able to find, in every situation, someone who has the deep sheer knowledge of the market, that has the ability to design a process and has a sheer understanding of the technological elements to come up with, that sort of end solution to like a list of ideas. But those are just my comments.
Thank you, Marco. That's interesting. It's interesting that you described the importance of the sort of diversity, and I think you were describing the double diamond process. I'm not sure what you meant by the diamond, but then you described one person who had the answer to the problem. There was one guy that just knew how to solve the problem. That
was supported by a group of guys that were ideating towards something. And all of a sudden, within the midst of the ideation, he said, wait a second, but you wouldn't be able to come up with that idea alone in the first place.
So this person's not alone. This person has a meadow of experts who are not doing this thing. I think you also said that you talked about lots of ideas and there's no such thing as a bad idea. I think you said that. The UK government was criticised last summer because there was a leak on a paper, and you probably saw there were a lot of people getting into very small boats coming over from France to try to seek asylum in the UK, and there was a problem because people were dying. And so the UK government had to work out how to address this issue. And there was a headline in the paper: UK government plans to build giant wave-making machine to push the boats back to France. That was a headline in the national paper taking fun out of the UK government. Transpires that was one idea in a creative brainstorming session, ideation, your language, to solve the problem. And you can imagine the facilitator goes into the event and says, look, we need some solutions to this immigration problem. Look, there's no such thing as a bad idea. Oh, great. Okay, well, why don't we make a big wave-making machine so big that it will blow all the boats? Great, brilliant, that's in. Yeah, lovely. It gets written up in the document because there's no such thing as a bad idea. It's a bad idea. It's a bad idea technically. It's a bad idea from energy usage. It's a bad idea politically. It should have been kicked out of the window. In fact, it shouldn't even come out of somebody's mouth, because the people ideating, your language, not mine, should be wiser than that. But the problem with that whole ideation, no such thing as a bad idea, is we measure value based on how many Post-it notes we have on the wall. And the good session is all of the walls filled with Post-it notes, so we can take a photograph of people looking at the wall, pondering. And that's deemed good, inclusive. I was going to start this session with a quote from a 1950s, 60s, 70s BBC radio program. And the program used to air on the BBC at 1:45 every weekday. It's called Listen with Mother. And it happened by chance, actually. It wasn't designed. It was said once, and it just landed as a brilliant way of opening the program. And it was basically a 15-minute storytelling for the children at home, preschool, with the mother, before Listen with Mother came afterwards. And the opening gambit was, are you sitting comfortably? Then I will begin. And the facilitation of an ideation session, the facilitator says, are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. We've created an environment where making people comfortable is our primary objective. But the human species classically only moves when it's uncomfortable. We only do something different when we're uncomfortable. If we're hungry, we get up and we eat. If we're too hot, we move into the cool. If we're too cold, we move into the warm. If we're fed up with our job, we move job. But we've created an innovation culture of making people comfortable. Hugo.
Okay, so but let's consider a practical example. I guess we have a few heads of innovation here in the room. Okay, and tomorrow, imagine that they like your theory. Okay, so what will change tomorrow? They will go back to not even go back. They just open Zoom and they start working, and they are going to be like, "That's the guy who knows the solution of how to innovate, how to come up with the next disruptive business model for my organization. I will stop my ideation funnel. I will just delete the innovation platform from Itonics or Bright Idea. I will stop all the ideation, design thinking alike workshops, startups and venture capital, please go home, because that guy is the guy. Or I've scanned all the guys in my organization and we don't have that person in. We need to contact HR to hire that specific guy. I'm thinking about how can we, in reality, apply your theory. Or let's imagine this is a typical innovation process. How might we experiment this?
Okay, so your head of innovation.
Experiment, yeah.
Yeah. So your head of innovation got £1 million budget annually to do that. So what you do to answer it, so how do you find the person? Well, actually, you say to your team, well, just watch that video on Hugo's website. What video? Oh, just have a look. And most people come back furious. That guy's a complete nutter. 1 or 2%, that's me. Or that's her over there.
I am terrified by this. I want to love this. I really want to love this, right? I mean, Hugo said something about everyone's creative, and I started shaking my head and going, no, they're bloody not. And there's also an issue of what does creativity mean, right? And the reason I want to love this is because if I come up with a big goal and this is what we're going to do and this is where we're going, it will be batshit crazy and it will be a stupid idea. I'm the person who said make a giant wave machine, right? I mean, I'm not, but you know what I mean. But if somebody gives me that goal, I'm extremely good at taking hugely complex environments, making connections and driving a very rapid plan towards that goal. So you find me that person who can come up with this is where we're going, this is how it'll work. I'll make it work and I'll love that, right? So I want you to find these people. Mm-hmm. But I'm just thinking, you know, I'm remembering the book, Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Get Promoted and What to Do About It? Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about what you said about the kid in the playground who gets picked on. The people who are going to put themselves forward and say, this is me. Give me the kudos, give me the budget, let me be the person who's the figurehead of this. This isn't the kid in the playground who got bullied. This is the incompetent man who gets promoted. This is the bully who's charismatic. This is the bro who goes out and gets the VC money in a different context, but now he's working in a corporate context. I'm really scared about who these people would be.
I'll tell you why it's not them. Because they get promoted because they've shown all the way through their career they're brilliant at doing that. Doing projects, hitting targets, on time, on budget, activity-based. That's what they're brilliant at. And there was an FT article 6 months ago about what is the role of a chief exec. And the article basically said most chief execs got promoted because they're brilliant at delivering things. And so there they are, chief exec. Well, what do you do as a chief exec? Well, I'm brilliant at delivering things. Tell you what, I'm going to go and get involved in the projects and deliver things. But the problem is, one is you shouldn't be doing that, but two, it's taking you slightly longer than expected to become chief exec. And so your delivery skills are a little bit old school, a bit like me, analog, you know, I haven't got some fancy digital thing. And so it's actually a bit of a nuisance. And so the article basically says, the role of this chief exec is pretty much do nothing. Come up with a strategy, stick to it. But chief execs don't like that because they're promoted by doing things. And this is, don't do anything. Don't be busy. So one of the problems with this is if you can identify the person, none of their colleagues are going to like them. We're back to the school playground. Because when their colleagues go to the canteen to squeeze 10 minutes, grab a sandwich, go back to the desk because they've got to deliver something, there's that person. They're sitting back, they're laughing, they're chatting to someone. Halfway through the afternoon, they go and get a cup of tea, exhausted. They're still there, just chatting, talking to people. It's always a different person, seems to get all sorts of people. We don't like that person. And so the challenge is actually not finding the person. The challenge is organizational psychology, which allows it to happen. And the reason why that person who's been wrongly promoted won't do it is because they can't bear doing nothing. And this person doesn't promise to do anything. And when you're not doing anything, Daniel Kahneman's thinking fast and slow. Well, not so. I describe it as I use a car as an analogy. There's three states: engine off, stationary; engine on, moving; engine on, stationary. Now, engine on, stationary in environmental car terms is awful, idling, pollution. Engine on, stationary in the human brain, bang! It is the most explosive moment. Daniel Kahneman's book. And so, when you're doing nothing, you can do all sorts of things. When you're busy doing something, you can only do one thing. And so the strap line to the talk, no thanks, we know how to do innovation. I don't know whether you've seen that cartoon that does the circles of the Stone Age men with a cart, with Stone Age cart with big square stone wheels with big sort of furrows in the ground. And there's another Stone Age man with a round stone wheel. No thanks, we're too busy. That's why they won't put their head up. They would be petrified doing nothing. Because this isn't about instantly coming up with a solution. This is not a formula. This is not, we've got a creative session, we need 100 ideas. This is do nothing, and you never know, you might come up with the answer.
In theory, I love it, brilliant. But I know an awful lot of people with big egos who would like to think they're that person and would put themselves forward. And I'm wondering organizationally how you make sure the right person, not the egotistical person, gets into that position.
So, because the person with the ego will be made to look stupid. Because there's a book written a couple of years ago, last year I think, called How to Change Your Mind, the new science of psychedelics. And it describes the effect on the brain of the use of psychedelic drugs. And one of the phenomena of use of psychedelic drugs is you can go through your own death. And it's a very strange experience. And a company I know in London are using, that they manufacture synthetic psilocybin to take the plan, once they get regulatory approval, is to take people who are diagnosed with incurable cancer, who basically the remaining months of their life are so bearable because they are so afraid of dying that their life and their family's life is hell while they're living. And so what they do is the plan, and it's happened in the past when psychedelics used to be used, you can take somebody on a journey to their own and beyond their own death. But the only way you can do that is to suppress your ego. And so not suppress, let your ego be suppressed. And it takes a relatively high ego to allow your ego to go. But what happens is that when you see the world, there's a very interesting maps done by Imperial College London, who are using psychedelics and then imaging the brain in order to understand consciousness. And the normal brain, the way the brain talks to itself is actually incredibly orchestrated. Under psychedelics, it's just complete chaos. And the chaos means that parts of your brain that are not allowed to speak to other parts of your brain suddenly start speaking with each other. And so actually what you see is a reality view of the world, not an orchestrated view of the world. And so the thing that controls all of that is called the default mode network in the middle of your brain. And some people refer to the default mode network as ego. because basically what it does is it allows you to see the world as you want to see the world. And it's a combination, it's not too far from Bayesian theorem, because what it does is it takes existing knowledge and multiplies it with real-time sensory input. And so this is a really digression, but it's quite useful because actually the way the human brain works in this small percentage of the population is not dissimilar to how the brain works under psychedelic drugs. So one way of scaling this is to take, not microdosing. There's a really interesting report done by Imperial, actually. Microdosing that's really popular in the West Coast at the moment it works, but nothing to do with the psychedelic. It's the perception that it will work means it works. And even if you take the psychedelic and you think you're taking a placebo, it doesn't work. That is how powerful, it's just been published. That is how powerful. But microdosing won't work because it's not actually basically unpicking your human brain. And so, but one way to scale this is, yeah, take a full dose psychedelic drugs, but that is not allowed at the moment. But we might get there. But there is this population. And so I hear the resistance, I hear the arguments, and I'm sympathetic to them. I'm sympathetic to Marco's frustrations. I'm sympathetic to how do you find this person? I'm sympathetic to I want it to work, but it's just no. Yeah. So the bit I sort of interrupted myself on is that you're there. You've got £1 million budget for R&D for innovation. Okay, you're an innovation unit. Let's have some fun. Set aside 5% of that budget and build a pump. Either that person rises up because you'll say, what's this pump you're building? Oh, it's this, oh, at last. Or you bring somebody in. The reason why the professor at Imperial described this as an impeller, it might be more easy if I call it a pump, because a ubiquitous impeller is a water pump. And you have to prime the pump. The reason why you have to prime a water pump is because pumps work by vacuum force. There's no such thing, but you get my idea. And so you need to create a seal on the inside of the pump. And so if you have air in your pump and you're trying to move water, but there's air in the pump, and you turn the impeller on and the air goes out, it just comes straight back in again. If you prime it, you've now created a perfect seal. So you turn the impeller on, and that lovely pun, solution moves. And the movement of the solution creates a vacuum which pulls through the bit you're moving, which is why you put a pump near the thing you're ahead of the volume you're moving. And so, but you need to create a vacuum. So you can't take the lid off a pump and watch it work. But we like seeing how things work because we have innovation process. We like visibility. We like to know what people are doing. And so this is a scary thing for business because you're investing in something that you can't take the lid off. But it's just 5%. Oh, that's too much. 1%. Give me 1% of your innovation budget, and I reckon I'll outperform your 99% in 5 years in the real world. 1%. Where's the risk? Give me 5%, fair game. I'll take 1.
I guess that's the risk, right? Because the funnel is the technique we use to de-risk. Okay, your theory.
Okay,
I need a lot of resources.
Okay, let me do a drawing for you.
And I don't de-risk. I just believe. Okay, that person is the guy.
Okay, so this is the model for de-risking, yeah?
Exactly.
Okay. I'll run alongside your other ones. On that one challenge, put 3 conventional ones in. I'll wrap all of that up, same budget as you're paying the other ones. I'll beat you.
Sorry, but is it the model below the traditional model that every single CEO believes? Like, I know my idea is good, okay, it's going to be a huge success, and it usually fails. So if we listen to Alexander Westerwalder, he talks about this often, right?
Okay. Yeah.
He's like CEO, Mr. CEO, you cannot bet, okay, on the right idea. That's not feasible. And he brings mathematics to the table, statistics. That's not feasible. What you are saying is, yes, it is feasible. Yeah. If we know if we empower the right person. So I guess the key question is, okay, but where is the right person? That's still my issue. I want to hire that person immediately. I'm going to become rich.
So there's the best way to find the right person is to hold up a mirror, not to yourself, but to other people. And the mirror describes another world where their ability to see a different world is valued. As soon as they see that, whether they know it or not, prior to that, this is I was expecting this because of the audience, which is why I entitled this one In-know-vation. Because in other audiences that are not innovation audiences, almost without exception, I find one or two of these people. People come up and say, literally the quotes, "You've given me goosebumps." Middle-aged manager in a telecoms company. Woman comes up working for a satellite company. All the way through your talk, my boss, who was doing this exec MBA with me, kept pointing at me saying, "He's talking about you. He's talking about you." A guy today, it took me 2 years to have a call with him. No, I had a phone call in between. Heard me speak 2 years ago. He works for a huge technology company. Yeah. I didn't have a clue where the conversation was going. But Jim, I'm in that 2%. Some people say to me, I'm close to it, but I'm not. I feel it, I know it, but I'm a good, back to my running analogy, I'm a good club town runner. I'm never going to make the Olympics, but I understand it because I know what it is to be a good runner. And for the chief exec who says, "Oh yeah, no, my ideas were great," let's have a race. It's a bit like somebody saying, "Yeah, I can run as fast as Usain Bolt."
But isn't he or she pointing the finger to the high energy, creative person in the room? Someone you call the entrepreneur.
This is not high energy. This is not high energy creative. This is sitting with your feet up. This is why nobody likes them.
I was going to ask as well, Jim. Can you do anything with the 3%er, or are they basically useless in this context? I'm thinking. I'm very sympathetic to Marco's argument as well, where someone pivots a bit for something that needs a pivot, right? Put something out there in the meadow that creates a pivot needed.
So what you need for these people are what I describe as patrons. You need people who are going to. I have various strange titles. I think I had it on the quote, didn't I? Fool, Joker, 10th man. I used the fool and the Joker. In the medieval court, everybody had a function in the court. They were in. So if we think of a 21st century organization as a medieval court in Europe, you have the king, and then you have a hierarchy of courtiers. And then you have some really functional people, most notably the minstrels, whose job it was to entertain. And in a sense, people were there because of their status, or people were there because they had a job to do. Except for the original fool, it started changing over the years when it became more of a jester role. But the original fool, and so the best way of understanding the fool is Shakespeare's King Lear. Watch it, read it, you will understand the role. But so to your point, Petter, is, so there's a guy I know that used to run a fintech accelerator. He actually lost his job. He phoned me up and said, "Jim, I tried to be the Joker and they cut my head off." And we had coffees and things, and he said, "Oh, I just don't know. Do I go back to being the chief exec, or do I become the Joker?" And I said, "You go to the chief exec, because actually finding these people is not as difficult as finding the kings who accept them." There is no medieval king who would have a court without a fool. I'm only aware of one organization that for 1 year, over 20 years ago, had a fool, and that's British Airways. And there's a book written about it. But here we are. Financial Times, 3 weekends ago. There's a book written by Manfred Ketz de Vries, 78-year-old professor at INSEAD Business School, called The CEO Whisperer. It's a different role. That's the role of the fool, which I also have. This is a different role, but it's the same dynamic. How many CEOs would have a fool visibly in their organization?
Sorry, just a final comment for me, because I really need to go back to work, but I don't think no one here disagrees of the importance of that person. You know, that person exists in almost every company. It's about how you enable that person to stand out.
It is.
It's the process that I don't agree with. You know, that, you know, this person exists, and normally you see these people being entrepreneurs. They start their own business, they know the market, they have a team they work with them, you know, then they launch a business. In the context of a team, and thank you for correcting me, the double diamond approach, discovery, you like list of problems, you concentrate on the problem, great, and then you start your funnel there, you know, fantastic. Now you still need a team, you know, how shall I put it? Even in an entrepreneur type of context, you know, you might have a situation where you don't just go with one solution. You try to see what fits best for your market, because even your own assumptions initially may be wrong, and that's why testing is so great, and that's why, you know, this new digitalization type of era we live in enable us to be more flexible to the type of solutions we can develop and the tests we can make, and that's great. I think, you know, that person, to your point, is super important. There's a book about Tendai Vicky called Pirates of the Navy that really speaks about this type of persons. It's just the type of angle we are going with that I tend to be more resistant about. But I obviously it's super important, and the role of a CEO is to say, I fucking need this person to stand out and help others to enable his or her thinking, not perhaps how it's structured, I suppose.
Helpful, Marco. Thanks, mate.
I agree with you in terms of the importance of this person.
Really useful. Thanks. So yeah.
Thank you for your lecture. I really need to go. Apologies, guys.
Pleasure.
Thank you for your lecture.
See ya. So I absolutely agree, Marco. I mean, I think the biggest challenge is not to find this person, but to find the king that allows them. But then I won't quote Marco directly, but it's no good just the chief exec saying you've got to go and listen to everything this person says, because mainly because this person doesn't say anything anyway, and two, because we now hate them. And so the challenge, and it's back to the definition of innovation being successful commercialization of a novel idea, and commercialization being a really complex, hard, whole system thing. The challenge for this system is organizational psychology. How do you create an organization that can cope with this, that isn't empirically driven? Oh, it's okay, we did some research. Oh, it's okay, we had lots of ideas. Oh, it's okay, we analyzed the ideas, we've done that. And that's called de-risking. I just call it dumbing down. You know, Henry Ford, classically, whether he said it or not, he's quoted as saying, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would set a faster horse. The really clever bit in Henry Ford was he paid his workers a higher than average salary so they could afford the car.
But that's not that's not the system. That's also incentive, okay, and culture. For instance, Linda Hill from Harvard, she talks about the creative abrasion. There's a paper on that I've just shared here on the chat window. But those are the components that the chief innovation or chief entrepreneurship or head of innovation, whatever, considers on his strategy. That's fine. We need a fool. We need a lot of fools. We need a lot of troublemakers. But my point in particular is that might give you a better opportunity to innovate, okay? But it does not guarantee, okay, innovation. It's another thing we can do to improve the odds. It's not the equation, the solution. Okay, I think everybody agrees that on the innovation side of things, on innovation worlds, we don't have a formula. Even the funnel we have there, many guys that I know, they don't believe in that. They're like, I don't believe in system. It's not linear at all. So that's the tricky thing of this world. That's why we love this world as well. This is not project management. This is innovation. It's like there's a bit of de-risking techniques. By the way, there's artificial intelligence now. There was a speaker here from Itonics, okay, using AI, data science, to tell you which ideas you should bet.
So 20 years ago, I argued that design could soon be done by algorithms, and that you can have a flavor of design output dependent on brand or design firm, because design became a process of asking people, of doing lots of things, of asking which one they want, of refining it down, asking them, refining it down, and out pops the solution. There's no, to your earlier point, there's no creativity in that. So most designers, so I was lecturing at a design school. I don't get asked to lecture at design schools very much because they don't like me. And I was lecturing and I was describing this person. And this woman gets in touch on LinkedIn afterwards and she said, I knew it. I'm adding the emphasis. You don't get that on the written word in LinkedIn. I knew it. I knew there was another world out there. I knew everything they were telling us about Double Diamond and all these sorts of things was a load of rubbish. I knew there was a new world. And I said to her, there isn't. It doesn't exist. I think you're, Hugo, more optimistic than I am. I think innovation is project management in pretty much every organization I see now. Unfortunately, well, it's not innovation, it doesn't lead to innovation, but what we call innovation is project management of a process. And we love process. And process, the de-risking is not de-risking what comes to market, it's de-risking promotion at the end of the year.
Yes, that I believe 100%. I see a lot of project management in the innovation. It's de-risking someone sending me home. That's what we usually see in large organizations.
So there's I was reading about the this issue with the vaccinations in continental Europe opposed to here, and the stop-start issue of the AstraZeneca vaccine. And the article was basically saying the reason why it's happening, the stop-start business, is because the decision makers are de-risking the decision. They're not stepping up saying, I'm a decision maker, I'll make a decision. It's my decision will default to getting more information. Oh, somebody said something. Oh, hang on, somebody's got a blood clot. Is it consequence of the vaccine? Don't know. I'll tell you what, let's stop doing the vaccinations. Of course, it's actually not as simple as that, because what would be fascinating is to see how many people die as a result of stopping the vaccine for a week. And then the consequence of the lack of confidence on the vaccine in their country, but most notably in the developed world where the only option is AstraZeneca. You have just de-risked something because you're saving your backside, but you've killed hundreds of thousands of people. That's the reality of a world where we need stage gate analysis before we go anywhere.
This was a thought-provoking session. We are running out of time. No, this was pretty cool. I think it's the word, because usually we have the bread and butter of things we can find in the book, and your energy and enthusiasm and the ideas that you bring to the table. It's precisely what we talk in a cafe, because it's a safe place to talk about these things. And I think this is what you need in a space like this. So thank you very much, Jim.
It's a pleasure. My closing remark is that somebody once was asked, what does this guy do? And the person said, he rather gets people to think uncomfortably. So listen with mother, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. In the world of innovation, none of us should be comfortable, because we need to create new things continually. But we've found comfort in that, and we've ground to a halt, and our productivity gains in the developed world are marginal. At that point, I shall close. But really enjoyable. Thank you very much. Thank you, Hugo, for the opportunity. Thank you for the questions and the challenges. Very uncomfortable. So you were doing a good job of making me feel uncomfortable. So I like that. To be continued, hopefully. We'll find out who wins. To be continued. Awesome, Jim. It was great. Brilliant. Take good care. See you all. It was fantastic. See you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.